I'm Alissa Murph, and this is my story. Hi, my name is Alissa Murph, and I have been diagnosed with stage 4 gallbladder cancer that has metastasized to several lymph nodes, so it is not operable or curable. Back in November of 2020, I started to have blood clots in my legs, and the doctors didn't know why I kept getting them because I was on blood thinners, but I just kept getting them and kept having to go back to the ER. And so in January of 2021, I had some really bad shoulder blade pain, and so I called my PCP, and he said to go back to the ER because that could be referred pain from blood clots in my lungs. So I went back to the ER, and I think that was my 5th visit, and they did a CT scan of my lungs. And I remember the doctor coming in. I was there by myself because of COVID, and the doctor came back in the room, and he pulled up a chair next to the bed and sat down and said, "Yes, we did find blood clots in your lungs, and unfortunately, we also found that you have gallbladder cancer." And I just remember thinking, asking him, "How do you know? Like, how sure are you that this is cancer?" And he said, "Well, I'm 100% sure that your gallbladder doesn't look like what it's supposed to look like." So I just remember wanting to get out of there, and I drove home in a bit of a daze and was just trying to figure out how I was going to tell John and the kids, and just imagining how difficult that was going to be. So I got home, and I did tell John, and I told the kids that I had cancer. And we just cried and held each other, and waited till my next appointment, which was the next week. I went in and I saw the surgical oncologist, and he took one look at me and admitted me because I was in excruciating pain at the time. And he said that he was going to do some further testing to confirm, but that it did look like stage 4 gallbladder cancer. And one thing that I loved is that he told me that in his long career, he said that he had seen things happen that were unexplainable. And so I knew that that was his way of saying that he has seen miracles happen. And so that was encouraging to hear from him. But they did do a fine needle aspiration while I was there, and it confirmed that I had stage 4 gallbladder cancer. And so I then saw a medical oncologist. Since they couldn't do surgery on it, it wouldn't be any benefit to take out my gallbladder since it had spread so much. But I went to go see a medical oncologist, and he confirmed the diagnosis and said that if I didn't do anything, I think my life expectancy was supposed to be like 6 to 12 months. And then he said if I chose to do the 3 chemo drugs he wanted me to do, that it might increase my lifespan to 19 more months. And so then I went out and got a second opinion at Moses Cone, and for several reasons I decided to have my chemo treatments out there. And so I did have chemo for about 2 months, and it was really difficult on me. And my oncologist even said at one point that the way my body responded to the chemo is what she normally sees in 80-year-olds and older. but we don't know why that is. But anyway, I remember my first chemo infusion, I had horrible burning pain as the drug went into my veins, and the nurse tried to put warm compresses on, but that didn't help. I just had to kind of wait for the bag to be done and for that particular drug to be done. So I also, while I was having chemo, I did something called cold capping, and that's how I was able to keep my hair, because that was really important to me. And so while I had chemo for my chemo lasted 8 to 10 hours every Friday that I went. But for about 8 hours, I would have this really tight cap on my head that ran ice cold water all over. And that makes the blood vessels constrict. And so the chemo drug can't get to your hair follicles as easily. And that was, while it was worth it, it was extremely uncomfortable. And I was just miserable while I was having my infusions. So I was getting to the point where I couldn't have all 3 drugs that they recommended because my white blood cell count was getting too low to do all 3 drugs. And I was absolutely miserable. I was staying in bed for about 5 out of the 7 days. And I really was questioning whether I should continue having the chemo, since it wasn't going to cure me and it was wrecking my quality of life. So I went out to Moses Cone and talked to the chaplain out there, and she asked me some really good questions to help me with my decision making. And after I talked to her, I went out to the gardens that they have there that are absolutely beautiful. And I went to this one little section called the Children's Circle, and there was just this circular patch of grass and butterflies on stakes all the way around it. And that was significant to me because I had chosen the butterfly to be my God creature like a long time ago. So whenever I see one, I'm reminded that God loves me. So I sat there in one of the chairs they had there and prayed and thought and just tried to decide if that was the right thing to do. And I kept just thinking that I needed to be done with it. And when I would think that way, I would feel just this absolute peace. So I decided there and then to stop the chemo. And I knew it would be really difficult for some of my family members and friends to understand, because I think they thought as long as I was doing chemo, I was good. But they were very clear with me that it would not cure me. So I did decide to stop doing it. And the way that I have really dealt with this journey is because God has given me a peace from the very beginning. And I know it has to come from God. Jeremiah 29:11 has always been a special verse to me, but it is even more so now. And that is, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. I knew that when I started this journey, that I would have a decision to make, that I could either trust God or not trust Him. And I knew that I could trust Him through this. And I know that He could heal me here if He wanted to. If He wants to, He can heal me here, and He doesn't have to have chemo on board. Or if He doesn't choose to heal me here, He can choose to heal me in heaven. And either way, I know He's good. And so I have been so blessed and amazed at the generosity and love from my friends and family and even strangers throughout this journey. God has shown up in so many ways, and I've received prayer from just countless people, and my church has been praying for me. I have received so many cards and gifts and meals. We were blessed with meals every other day for 2 months when I was going through chemo, and it was just amazing. And a good friend set up a GoFundMe account that raised money for us, and then 4 just amazing people set up these pool tournaments as benefits for me. And all of those things have just been such a blessing and such a tangible way of seeing God providing for us and God's unconditional love for me. And I've even been able to fulfill a couple bucket list items. Gary Ornoff, who owns Q Masters in Virginia Beach, set it up for me to be able to be the rat girl for a couple of famous professional pool players, Johnny Archer and Rodney Morris. And so I was able to be the rat girl for that tournament. And then the famous pool player, Allison Fisher, was gracious enough to come to my house and give me a lesson on my table, and just spending time with her and gleaning from her knowledge of pool was just a huge blessing. And I'm just very grateful for all the ways that my friends and family have shown me love through this.
Is she gonna get it right?
Probably not.
She's cheating.
Looking back, I can see that God has been preparing me for this. There are 3 trials in particular in my life that I can look at and see how God has used them and getting me through them to prepare me for handling this journey the way that I have been. And one of those things was that I was adopted at birth, and while that was a huge blessing and I wouldn't go back and change it at all, I had internalized feelings of rejection and abandonment and feeling like I'm not worth it or I'm not worth keeping. And I know those were all lies, but at the time I didn't know that. And so it made me, it kept me from feeling God's love for me, because I just thought I wasn't lovable. So I had to work through those issues in counseling. And when I did, it was really helpful. And another event that happened in my life that was earth-shattering at the time was I lost my father when I was 16 years old. He died of a massive heart attack, and I had to do CPR on him with my mom. And that just rocked my world, because I was a daddy's girl. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was angry at God for years for that, because I thought he took my father from me, and what good God would do that? But I had a friend challenge me one time when she heard me use that word take, and it made me really examine myself, and I did realize that I was angry at God and thought he had just done that to hurt me. And I finally realized that no, God did not do that to be mean or spiteful. My dad died because we live in a broken world, a broken and fallen world, and death is just part of it for now. And so once I worked through, that anger with God, I started to be able to accept his love for me, and that was life-changing. The other trial that I experienced was debilitating clinical depression for probably about 20 years. I just had horrible depression and would pray and go to counselors and doctors. And for a while, I just was not getting any better. And I started to believe the lies that the enemy wanted me to believe. And that was that I wasn't going to ever get better. And I even, was getting suicidal. And so I went to go see a good friend who runs a bipolar support group, bipolar and other illnesses support group. And he prayed for me. And within about 7 days, I started to get better. And then over the course of the next several months, I was eventually cured from my depression. I realized that, I needed some counseling for some of these issues. And then I also found out that I have a gene mutation called the MTHFR gene mutation. And that kept my body from being able to produce the chemicals that I needed to produce to not have depression. And so I'm able to take a methylated version of folic acid and B vitamins that has absolutely cured me from depression. But during the time that I was going through that, I really felt like God wasn't hearing me, that my prayers were hitting the ceiling, and I just really didn't think that He cared. And when He healed me from it, I could look back and say, okay, He was there. He was listening. He heard me. He had my healing already planned out. I just couldn't see it yet. And so that really helped me with learning how to trust Him no matter what, no matter how dark things seemed or how hopeless the things seemed. I knew I could trust Him, and I know I can trust Him. I have also learned through this journey that God has given me a really interesting platform to be able to talk to other people about Him and His goodness and His love, and with a boldness that I haven't really had before. And it's been interesting because I'll talk to guys at the bar where I'm shooting pool, and even strangers, I'll tell them about my situation and my diagnosis, and they'll tear up and be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, no, I'm good. I know that God is going to heal me one way or the other. And if it's in heaven, that place is a whole lot better than here. But also that He can heal me here. And it's been a real blessing to be able to do that with both friends and strangers. And what I love is that I've had both people that I know and then people that I've just met say, you know what, I don't pray at all, but I'm going to pray for you. And that, I love that, because not necessarily because they're praying for me, but because they're talking to their Heavenly Father when they might not otherwise be talking to Him. And we know what happens when we seek God. We find Him. And so I've really loved that opportunity to be able to share with others what God has done in my life and just how good He is. I would encourage those of you who are going through cancer or depression or just really any trial in life, I would really encourage you to seek God and seek help from others. I don't think we were meant to do this life alone. And so I'm a huge proponent of counseling, if you need counseling, or just reaching out to friends and asking for help. I really encourage you to look back at your life and see where God has been good and where He has answered prayers, because it's in remembering those times that helps us to move forward and know that He's going to be with us no matter what. And one of my favorite verses is James 1:2, and the Passion Translation of those verses says, "My fellow believers, when it seems as though you are facing nothing but difficulties, see it as an invaluable opportunity to experience the greatest joy that you can, for you know that when your faith is tested, it stirs up power within you to endure all things." And I have absolutely seen God do that in my life. He has used the trials that I've gone through to develop a faith and a trust in Him that is helping me get through this trial, this journey,